Yeah, are you getting it? Do you have sound?
I don't know. Is that better?
I hear you. Hello, everybody. We are live on YouTube and I think X as well. I'm here with Christine Sefein and Cari Bartholomew. And as we were on Monday, we're trying out a new platform. I mean, I should stop saying that because it's like our fourth time using it, but it's still like, what do you get when you add like middle-aged women to technology is you get
Right,
confusion, you know?
right.
So here we are trying
I
to sort it out.
know.
Well, it's still canceling out your voice, so I think you're not being picked up. Yeah, I think it's still. So you decide if you want to fiddle with it a little bit more, that's fine, or we can just try to like we'll have to keep asking you to repeat yourself.
Okay.
So, Cari, um, now that you're situated, hello, Helena, in the chat, and thanks for joining us. We have done I don't know how many of these now. I should count them and so that we're numbering these streams. But if you're new to these streams, this is a little chat that we do once or twice a month, the three of us, and we have done for a year and a half ish, something like that. And it's just sort of a chance for us to round up some of our experiences and thoughts. And Cari in particular has been really politically involved. Christine is a former psychology professor, counseling professor, and you guys probably know who I am, but I've been hosting this channel for 2 years now. I just passed my 2 year anniversary from the first time I posted on YouTube. It was October 19th.
Ah,
And
congrats.
yeah, crazy sequence of events, really, it's been. But um, what is going on in your world right now, ladies? Cari, you had some things you wanted to talk about today.
Yeah, I just got back from the Empowered Ed conference. Am I coming through clearly? Ish.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
So I just the Empowered Ed conference, and a few things that were really striking to me is that I spent 3 days with Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Christian, all of us together, and all of us very, very concerned about what's going on in the K-12 space. So every single group feels that in this need to be quote unquote inclusive, they are being turned into the oppressors. One of the most shocking things I found out was that people who are Hindu coming here from India, and this is their phrase, they would say, "We come here with $43 and a suitcase," and their children are being taught to hate them.
Mm.
One, we're
Mm.
not a couple of generations out. We're talking the same children who are like, "Mommy, I want hugs for Christmas," right? They're the same people who are saying, and I mean that respectfully. So if anybody's like, "Oh, your accent," but I pick up what they how they were talking, and so, but somebody who says, "I want this, I need this, you need to buy me this," is also saying, "You are privileged, you have too much." And so they're really, really fighting that. Things I didn't understand about the caste system, they don't want the caste system taught because they don't believe it's being taught correctly. Um, and Jewish people, same kind of thing. It's just the fact that they're watching their children. While I was at the conference, I was getting texts from people who had recorded their classrooms and recorded what their teachers were saying here in Utah. And it's really shocking. I think another thing that we did that I really want to discuss is Braver Angels.
Hmm.
So Angels is, do you know what it is?
I do, but would you first say where was the Empowered Ed conference and what was that, real quick, just to recap that? What is that?
Sure. It's in Sacramento, California. And Leslie, it was honestly like a reunion of your show. There were so many people who've been on your show
Oh,
there.
really?
Jason Littlefield,
Oh.
we just and then there were other people too. So one was a psychologist who you should talk to at some point. She is only about 25 years old, and she was a member of Antifa in Seattle. And when she started reading about cults, Christine, so you too, when she started reading about cults, she realized, uh-oh, this is what I'm doing. And so she's just a profound young woman. I'm happy to share with you her information. But the thing about Braver Angels that was really quite scary, because you're thinking about this. I mean, this was so Empowered Ed is the Jewish liberal, the Foundation for Jewish Liberal. Um, I want to say academics, but I'm going to.
Okay.
This is Brandy Shutfatinsky.
It's a Jewish Institute for Liberal Values, right? Okay.
Yes, yes. Jewish Institute for Liberal
Mm-hmm.
Values, and multiple other groups. So, like the American Leadership Academy, the Hill Project. There, a few speakers who came from communism, who escaped communism. So we got Cambodia and China, and all of them. I mean, the woman from Cambodia, she was in work camps when she was a child. So it wasn't just teenagers that they were taking children away. And her father and her brother were sadly lost. I just picked up her book. Um, I I don't have it in front of me, but I'd be happy to share it with anyone who wants to know. Um, but the thing is that Braver Angels came in, and what they do is their focus is to try and get people to be able to have constructive conversations together. I'm not talking about courageous conversations necessarily, but I kind of think that's where this thing goes.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just very um
So
so
Braver
the first
Angels was at the Empowered Ed conference.
yes, it was
Okay.
one of the, so we had 3 days. So we had teachers speaking,
Mm-hmm.
we had parent panels. I was on the parent panel, and we had some school board members, and we didn't have politicians. We did have attorneys speaking at this, and then we had the writers speaking. We had breakout groups, just learning about how heavily invested the funding is. But the main thing that I was the most interested in was literally watching like this one beautiful, stunning woman. She's the head of Muslim Reform. And I was interested in that, and I want to have a conversation with her. I'm going to have a conversation with her because I am very cautious of Christian reform. I'm very cautious of people coming in and saying, well, you misinterpreted the Bible and it actually means this totally different thing than it actually means.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but her argument was we had the Nicene Creed. And so a lot of things were taken out, a lot of things, the more quote unquote worthy things were kept in. And so with that, um, she wants to do the same thing. They want to take out the violence. Um,
Mm-hmm.
since October 7th, a lot of temples in California, Jewish temples, have been kind of vandalized, and nobody's saying a thing. Pass right over. And I think, yeah, the fact that these people could sit in a room and we didn't need to be guided in the conversation. We could all speak respectfully to each other and with concern. And nobody had, like in the woke circles, there's a hierarchy of who's the most oppressed. That was not going on. This was complete empathy for every group. And I thought that was something beautiful. So this was after. So every night we would have a banquet. Don't tell my health coach that, but we'd have a banquet. And then afterwards, we would have, we sat and we talked for like 4 hours in the lobby. And we really built kind of a close connection in that little bit of time. And I'm talking about people who people would assume that we all have projections and biases against each other. But we were just listening to each other as human beings, which I believe is the classical liberal response.
Mm-hmm.
And so let me just go into Bravery Angels because that's really where I would love to take what they did. So we go into this Bravery Angels conference on the last day, and they have an excerpt that they say, this is how conservatives sound, and this is how a liberal sounds. Okay, first off, I want to be really clear. I would say the majority of the people there would consider ourselves to be classical liberal. As far as we are classical liberal, and as far as really most of life goes. I have conservative values, but I feel like my conservative values are pretty liberal. So what we were taught in this thing, we were to read these excerpts, and I wish I had the excerpts in front of me, but I think when I was clearing out my luggage, I messed it up. Anyways, one of them started off with, these liberals, I am so angry. I can't stand this. How dare they? Blah, blah, blah. It was so extreme, 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 extreme language. And then for the liberal view, it was, I'm really concerned and afraid of these conservatives. They want to take away critical thinking. They don't want our children to read. They're afraid of immigration and and while yeah, immigration and open borders is a conversation we can have, to say that we don't want our children to think critically is but the most offensive thing was to start us off in a tone that we're always angry.
Can I make a comment real quick about this before we continue? Because, I'd been working at FAIR for a bit of time and then I left, but somebody there once said, and I thought this was brilliant, and Braver Angels is sort of proving this point. He said, anywhere that claims to be bipartisan or nonpartisan tends to lean left. There's no such thing as a purely centrist organization. And I thought that was brilliant because even in listening to how the liberal was speaking, very afraid but docile and also gentle, and how the conservative was speaking, which was angry and attacking, you can see the discrepancy and the bias that they had in describing those two sides. So it's just interesting because I do believe that that's in line with leaning more left, that there's no real such thing as a purely centrist organization that is, built around education and the kinds of social political issues that we talk about on here. So I wanted to just make that note because I think that that's very powerful. I think FAIR even leans one way or the other.
I think
So I'm
that
not
that's
saying,
that's such a good point, Christine, and I wonder if that's because just the process of being open and tolerant of diverse viewpoints skews things towards the progressive. I mean, if you're in a situation where everybody is coming from different perspectives and you're trying to honor and embrace and accept everybody to the table, does that necessarily skew left?
No,
Why not?
gonna be blunt there.
No,
No,
why not?
because when you are a person who sees people as individuals, you're more likely to be open and tolerant. That's what I've seen. I have seen when the left pulls people into collectives, there is we must march in lockstep. Now, I'm not going to say that's not on the right, but that is on this extreme thing that I'm not part of. And that does not mean that I'm a quote unquote moderate or a rhino, as people would use that term. I'm neither of those. I truly believe in the individual, and the individual has worth. And I want to know, and I think that actually it's been proven, conservatives are more likely to listen to news from both points of view. Like, we both will listen to CNN. I actually don't listen to, like, ever. I get my news from alternative media. So, but that is a study that has been shown that conservatives are more likely to to listen. And that's what I found, is that I wasn't surprised by the things that they were saying. Every viewpoint that they said, it didn't shock me at all. It just disappointed me that they were presenting themselves as neutral. Now, I want to be fair because Braver Angels does have conservative trainers, and they've tried to give feedback. So there's a video where they're showing all of these different people, and the viewpoint of the conservative is a fat, angry white guy. And so one of their conservative people has said, that doesn't represent me. And in this meeting, there's probably 40 to 50 people inside our breakout training. And we were all sitting there going, this is not a fair representation, because what you're presenting as the liberal viewpoint, we all agree with. and I said, I don't think you should use the word liberal. I think you should use a leftist viewpoint if you really want to have valid discussion and teach us how to be able to sit in the room. And I could feel in this very safe space, I could feel very like my heartbeat racing and being like, oh my gosh, these people like me. They aren't going to like me when they realize my views on things. Oh gosh. And even in this place that was supposed to be safe, and it come to find out that just I didn't have to worry about that. Most of us vary just a little bit. Like there were teachers who did believe in globalism,
Mm-hmm.
but explained what I saw as globalism, they were like, "Oh, I don't want that." So we see things. We're looking at the world through two extremely different worldviews, and that has been very eye-opening. It was an affirming conference. It made me want to go and learn more. I grabbed everybody's books who were there.
Mm-hmm.
but but I have not found that the radical left um, cares to hear a different point of view. I think I told you the last time we were on that somebody had said, um, "You're a conservative. Caring isn't in your wheelhouse." And I
Hmm.
thought, 4 years. I have been in this battle for 4 years because I sure don't care about anyone or anything. you
Well, I
know?
think that you're pointing out a lot of really important things, and that there's the tales of each faction of the left or the right, the authoritarian side of both, that has a really fixed and dogmatic black and white view. Speaking, we're in black and white right now. It's kind of funny, but of the other, right? The perceived other. And so you'll have those we could say radical leftists or totalitarian right wing factions that will have that kind of view of the other. And I think that those tend to get overrepresented in media and in discourse about politics. But I wonder, when it comes right down to it, what does it mean to be conservative? What does it mean to be progressive? And I would put those as the two. I would use those terms myself as the sort of categorical terms instead of liberal, because liberal is being used to mean all kinds of things that it doesn't really mean right now. And so progressives would be those who are striving for social change, wanting to change something in a different direction, seeing things as what, flawed, not necessarily because they want more collectivism, but because maybe it's in the name of individualism. I mean, it could be a lot of things, but want social change. Versus conservatives, which would be those who think things are running pretty well or used to run pretty well, and we need to hold back the tide of social change. That's what I mean. Tell me, you look like you don't agree with that. So tell me what you think.
Do you want to go, Christine, or do you want me
Oh,
to
I
go?
can. Sure. I mean, we were having a conversation about this yesterday. I was with some people I was at dinner with, and one of the people that was there is labels himself as conservative, and he goes, but my values though, are about family and about freedom and liberty to choose how you want to run your life and your family's home, little government controlling parts of your life, and that to me also is what a liberal's value set is supposed to be. So I call myself conservative, but my values in what I say I believe in are actually values that liberal folks or people who identify themselves as liberals would say they want too. And therefore, I don't think conservatism is as far away from liberalism as one would, as we're assuming, let's say. And he said, and I'm more conservatively connected to the Constitution. The Constitution to me is a more it isn't up for discussion kind of thing. That's the way that we need to be running our country. It's there for a reason. And that's where probably most of the conservatism in the way that I think lies, is what's in the Constitution. But value set is very similar to what the liberals would say. I disagree at this point because I think, Leslie, what you're saying about liberal being too broad is important, because I don't think that's the sweeping value set of the progressives on the far left. They tend to want more social change. They want to do it through disruption. They want to do it through dismantle. They want to do it through any way that causes chaos so that we actually never come back again and form any kinds of systems of any type whatsoever that are unified, that are, you know, peaceful, that aren't full of chaos. So I think it's important to say that's maybe the progressive left rather than that's the liberal. And so I guess that those are my thoughts on that. The conservative side I thought was interesting, that he sees himself as conservative, says I'm pro-life, but I also don't give a a crap at all. If somebody has an abortion, it's their body and it's their choice. Literally saying the same two things in the same sentence that are supposed to be offsetting each other here, right? So that to me gave me a different perspective of somebody describing what their conservativeness is all about. Because I don't call myself a conservative either.
So I don't like the term progressive because people get their attention in 2 minute TikTok, or they get their information in 2 minute TikTok videos. So I don't like the idea of when you hear progress, you think that sounds wonderful, of course, and I think it's far more regressive. Um, Again, something I said last time we spoke was I refuse to teach children to be bigots. Period. Um, and that is what I see leftism doing. So I use the term left rather than liberal. I use the term, and I use, when they say far right, I respond with far left every single time. Like if you get to give far right that much weight, then I get to give this much weight. So um, when I was gone, I made a sub plan, and my lesson was on the two wings of the eagle. Why both are important. We need the empathy that a classical liberal or even a leftist believes it's what they want. Um, and so we absolutely need that. But we also need the logic and the reason. And that's where I think conservatism, it's not that I don't want to protect the planet. It's not that I don't use recyclable bags, or reusable bags. Like I use those kind of things, but I use them on my own terms. It's not that I'm against immigration. I'm not against legal immigration. I am against criminals coming into our country, the doors being opened and them coming in, especially when our young children don't have the value system that they used to have. This is going to get me in trouble, but when I see girls looking like they're going to a P. Diddy party when they go to prom, I I worry that because they don't have the principles. I'm not talking that they need to wear, it's funny because I've got a neckline like this, but I'm not talking that they need to wear some neckline and have their shoulders covered or even not have their belly showing. I'm talking if I can't tell the difference between them and a streetwalker and they're 15 years old,
Yeah.
kind of thing. That doesn't mean that I think that we should go backwards and everybody needs to live in corsets, or be completely obedient to their spouse or anything like that, because
Right,
I don't see it that way, and I don't think most conservatives do. Most
right.
of us are slowly moving along the line. My problem is when the leftists have really bad ideas, truly bad ideas, like mutilating children, okay? Like teaching kids not to live in a space of gratitude, not to be okay with how their families provide for them, but to instead turn around and hate them. And not even to realize that you hate the people who are making sure that you have the best clothes in school.
Well, I think it's interesting. We could go on about labels and why we choose the labels that we do. I don't I don't agree with any of them necessarily. I think that they're all kind of superficial. They all end up being sort of reductive and missing a lot of the nuance and the real meaning behind the values that people are choosing to align with. I've thought for a long time that really the in actuality people are a lot more aligned than they think that they are, than they perceive themselves to be. Like people on the left and on the right often kind of at their core want the same things. They're just going about it in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And the real problem is reductionism and these sorts of hasty generalizations that we're making about the
Mm-hmm.
other. And so this kind of ends up with this factionalism and polarization. But something that you said there, Cari, about we don't want to go back in time and put kids in corsets or whatever it was that you said. Um, don't we though a little bit want to go back a little bit? I mean, this is something I wonder about. I wonder about this. Like we have, and I asked something about this when we were on solid ground at the very end of our conversation on Monday. I'll put this together really. I'll try to formulate this quickly. But when I was in graduate school and I was in a human sexuality course for counselors, we were, I was really, I was left very confused about where are we coming from in this question as counselors. We don't have a moral perspective. We have an amoral perspective. We are being taught that as long as it's not causing the individual distress, it is not our job to opine or feel any which way about what's going on in that person's life, be it they're a prostitute, they're a pornographer, they are polyamorous, they are whatever BDSM, anything that person does. We are not to take a value position with respect to what that person is doing, as long as it's not causing the individual some kind of distress that they perceive about that thing. We can only work with them about their distress. We don't get to have a position on this. And so what this made me think was, well, I don't think that that's healthy. I think that, for instance, this is a really vulgar thing that I'm going to say, but this is one of the examples that was given in that human sexuality class. My professor said she had a client who told her that he was doing scat porn.
Mm.
And so I've said this before, but and I'm sorry that people have heard those words out of my mouth because I don't want to have to say that. But this is what the professor said. And her point to us wasn't to analyze this deeply and think about what this represented for this person and why would this person, all the feelings that you might have about finding oneself in this position. It was to tell us sometimes your clients will say really shocking things and you have to not laugh. That was her whole point, was she had to stifle her laughter. And so we have to be prepared for our clients to say crazy things and not laugh. I mean, and I use the word crazy, it's almost a Freudian slip there. But the thing I wondered was, well, if I think that this is unhealthy, what do I point to as my position on this? Because I just have me, right? All I can say is, well, here's my values, but I don't have some kind of cultural consensus of morality that I can point to and say, a healthy lifestyle is one in which a person is aiming to settle down in a monogamous married relationship. I can't say that because what is my backdrop? Unless I'm a Christian counselor, then I could say, here's the Bible and that's my moral authority. But if I'm just me, then what am I pointing to? Because my books that teach me and my teachers and my professors say anything goes as long as you're not distressed by it.
This
But
is the
it's
problem. Go ahead, Cari.
okay, it's not necessarily a religious thing, and that's where I think that it's leaning into the facts. The facts are that civilization ends if we don't have primarily heterosexual relationships. That's a fact.
Right. But But that's one from which we could, if we look at facts also, people argue facts all over the place. Like if you want to talk about heterosexual versus homosexual, people point to the animal kingdom, and there's lots of examples there. And so, I don't want to argue, I'm not arguing in favor of only heterosexuality. I'm not even saying that.
but I am saying that it is a true thing. And these are the kind of like, in order for civilization to progress, you need to reproduce. At some point, it stops if you can't reproduce. So I'm talking at a very basic level. I'm not talking about the religion
Well,
aspect of
then
it.
what's wrong with a man having 30 wives and impregnating all of them? So, I mean, I'm
And
saying like from
I'm saying,
reproduction, you don't necessarily get a value system. And I'm
right?
asking about a moral value system. And don't we want to move backwards towards a prior consensus?
Well,
I,
there are
I
people, wives, or at least six. I live by them. So, and
I mean,
you would,
I'm going to just throw a total curveball here, which may not make sense at all to anybody in the conversation, but this is what I think of. I think the fact that we've moved away from assimilation and is a very dangerous thing because America does have a culture. There is a culture here. There is an American culture, and we've had a culture, and it's changed. But if we go backwards in time, the idea of immigration was to immigrate here and adopt the value set of what this culture was about. Yes, you can maintain your own and you maintain your traditions and you adopt these new ways of being that keep culture intact. That has become completely off the table now. And now it's all about accommodating every brand new culture that comes here so that we have to have things written in 1600 languages on every document that we put out there. We have to make sure that we're not microaggressing this person or that person or that person because that may upset them. So we've almost come to a place where we've disintegrated what the value set of being an American is truly about and what it means to be an immigrant and to come here. And part of that's assimilation. And that's something that my parents taught me. So maybe I'm biased toward that. But if I had not assimilated and learned to become a part of this bigger culture, my value set as a person would have been very, very different. And I don't think that I would have been as open minded. I don't think that I would have been as compassionate either, quite frankly. So I think that us accommodating these newer groups coming in is more problematic than those groups coming in and needing to accommodate and adopt a culture that they then practice as well.
At
That's
what
where I
point,
stand on it.
Christine,
That could get me into a lot of trouble
what would be the
for
point that you
saying.
would put a pin in to say this is American culture? Where would be that point?
I think that I would go back and I would say, I would go back to the Constitution, the right to live, freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, and, you know, the family unit being where all of those things originate or where those things first start or are the foundation or the foundational principles. Because I think if we move back a little bit in time when family was important, look at the television shows we watched back in the day. Yeah, they solved problems in 30 minutes or less, but you wouldn't be you're hard pressed to find a TV show from 10, 20, let's say 20 years ago, where you would be afraid that your kid would watch you seeing it when they're walking by the television because there was a lot of violence or there was too much sex or there was too much fill in the blank. There was still this innocence about children that we appreciated and that we supported rather than saying innocence means you're naive and therefore we need to educate you as a naive person. Whereas innocence is saying you haven't been exposed to something yet, and it's probably okay and appropriate that you haven't been exposed to masturbation at the age of 8 by watching it on a cartoon that we're going to show in the classroom. So I think it's hard to say specifically where I'd put the pin in because I think this is something that has evolved over these decades of immigration. America today does not look like the America of 30 or 40 years ago. Mind you, as women, we had probably less rights. We probably weren't able to work outside the home as much. There's a lot of things that we may be giving up. So, quite frankly, if we were evolving, we would maintain the parts of our culture that are working and the parts of our culture that matter and that do bring levels of emotional and mental well being into our lives, and drop the stuff that doesn't. And perhaps then we would have a more sort of moral type of culture that has values, that has moral values in it. I can't say that there's a place where I would pin it, but I can say that 20 years ago, I did not find myself having to stop myself from saying God when I say the Pledge of Allegiance, because it
Mhm.
was completely um, offensive to other people that were in the classroom, even though that is part of our culture. We sing the national anthem and we say the Pledge of Allegiance. We don't kneel when we say the national anthem like they were doing in NFL games, a couple of years back. They've stopped. But that's where I would say those idiosyncrasies, those nuances come into play. And American culture is nuanced, I think, because we have so much influence from immigration. But assimilation needs to be the key to protect what we have here in the United States. And that's what we're dismantling when we have immigration today that's A, not legal, um, or B, we accommodate to a fault
I
because we
think
don't want to offend or hurt anybody.
your points about assimilation are really good and really important. But even if, let's just say, immigration ended today and we didn't have anybody else join in, we still have a problem. I mean, that, and I'm just
Sure,
like putting immigration on the back burner. We still have a problem now with having a lack of moral cultural consensus. And I think that there's always going to be people who will push against constraint. There's always going to be a,
sure.
I wonder if it's just an inevitable social phenomenon that we have. We tighten down on morality or on norms, and then there will be people who create exceptions and push against that. Those exceptions will grow and grow and grow until there's chaos, and we'll have to have another tightening. Is it just going to be a perpetual swing? Because I think that that seems quite likely.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking, I was thinking we sound probably like our parents back in my day, but I do think that the pin is probably in the 90s. In the 90s, we were far more tolerant for the most part. Has racism ever been eradicated? No, absolutely not. But we weren't trying to. We just rejected the idiots who thought that way. That's what
Right.
back then, right? So I think that when we say the Constitution, we run into all sorts of problems because the Constitution, there were people who were signing it who didn't agree with everything on it.
Yes.
So, and what we have now, I mean, I do want to conserve at least the concept and the building blocks of the Constitution. And we have somebody who may be elected next week who's saying that the Constitution is a living document constantly evolving. We have to have some common thing. And that common thing, again, as I talk to Hindus and Muslims and Jewish people and all these people who came here seeking refuge, and all of them will say, we came to the greatest country in the world. And these are people who are black and brown saying, we
Mhm.
came to the country in the world despite, doesn't mean that they don't get bigotry. It doesn't mean that after 9/11 people didn't look at their families and think the absolute worst of them, because that absolutely happened. But what we're doing now is pushing to a place. I loved what the commenter said about it comes down to truth. There is a truth. And if they can get us to say, no, everybody has their own truth, the more that they water that down, the more we're going to lose having any kind of a cultural whatever. Like the reason this show thrives, the reason that my platform expands in the way that it does is because I refuse to bow to a lie. That's why people come and watch these because they want to hear people talking about truth, right? And it doesn't mean that we all agree 100% in lockstep, but there's some root to it. There's some root that pornography is bad for kids. That doesn't
Mhm.
make me that makes me someone who understands what losing innocence is.
I think
Um,
part of the issue too is in the world of psychology, what you're taught and trained is that the world is interpreted through your own perspective.
Mhm.
Your perspective is shaped through your experiences, where you've been, where you grew up, how you grew up. And because of that, you may have a very unique perspective that um, is your own lens, the lens through which you see the world. And so there is truth to that too. And I think that's another component is that we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. The field of psychology and therapy in general is overly captured and of course has become very radicalized. But there's also some piece of truth, if we use that word again, to somebody's lived experience mattering in some way. It matters in the sense of how they move through the world. It doesn't mean it's objective truth. And I think that's the thing that separates my truth versus objective truth. The objective truth components, and I think this is what you're saying too, are what need to remain in place in order to have any sense of moral compass or value or um, sense of who we are and what is appropriate and what's not appropriate. Those objective truths need to remain. Everything else becomes very much shaped by your history, by the way you think, by your own resilience, by the protective factors that are around you. Why do some people end up, alcoholics and who are abused and other people don't? There's a lot of factors that contribute to that. So those are different, so are we talking about your truth or objective truth? Those are two separate things in the way that I understand it. And
we also
psychology teaches you to respect the client's own experience of their world. But when you align with stuff that isn't objectively true, I think that becomes problematic in psychology, psychotherapy. Like it is wrong for an 8-year-old to watch porn. That's just wrong. And I think that's an objective truth. That may not be the way somebody else sees it, but I believe that that's the case. So if my client ever said, is it okay? My answer would be no. Not, well, let's explore why it would be okay. And let's explore. That's a whole different kind of conversation. Again, it's nuanced.
So you're using a good example for that point because it illustrates something that I think everybody. I think it'd be very rare to find somebody who would disagree with that. We can say safely that we do have a moral consensus around an 8-year-old watching pornography, but what we don't have is a moral consensus around, let's say, a 25-year-old watching pornography. We have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people who would say that's totally fine. In fact, if you have a problem with that, then you're the problem. That you're wrong for having a problem with that. Um, we don't have a consensus about a lot of these things, and you can. I think what you were pointing to is you can develop a a moral standpoint by demonstrating the sort of empirical facts around something. Like you can make the argument that from which you can base your position that that's wrong. But somebody else could also develop an argument from which they would say that that was right. And now you're just yelling facts back and forth. What we're lacking is some sort of moral authority for these kinds of positions. And I feel like what I have been experiencing over the past, I don't know, my adulthood, let's say the past 20 years, is this recognition that there's a breaking down of things that would have been givens a long time ago. There's things that we would have confidently been able to say, well, that's wrong. Like it's wrong to be a prostitute or to solicit a prostitute. And now we have a lot of people who would argue and say that we should legalize sex work and that it's not a sin and it's not anything, there's nothing wrong with that. And surrogacy is another one, right? Surrogacy is one where I don't know, how many years ago would it have been shocking to think of somebody just selling their womb, renting their womb. And now there's industries built on this. And so
Yes.
it just it feels like we have degraded in terms of moral consensus to the point where there's just a spiritual black hole where the culture
Yes.
used to be. And now we're trying to piece it back together with a legal strategy. Like we're trying to put laws around things where that should be about morality and spirituality and ethics.
But not
Mm.
just trying, and I do believe we are trying to turn the state into God.
Mm-hmm.
And this does
Mm-hmm.
not believe in a moral code. The state believes in a queer code. And again, queer does not mean anti-lesbian or gay. Queer
Mhm.
means to what is normal, to reject even the idea of normal. Okay, so if we're supposed to lean into this obedience to the state, and again, the state is not our state, the state is global. The state is a government that tells us everything that is acceptable and isn't acceptable. There's no way that they can do that without being extremely authoritarian. So, what I found when I was sitting in this room with people that I don't agree with religiously and I don't share their experience is that I don't need to be coached in a courageous conversation on how to listen to them or how to be respectful.
Mhm.
That's something that we need. And in fact, that does worse. What happens, and I'm sorry, and it's going to sound racist, and I don't mean for it to sound that way, but truth is truth. What happens is women in their 40s and 50s who think that they are the experts on all things that they know nothing about are writing books and telling everybody that they are the experts and we must listen to them. And then you sit in a room with people who don't. They they do sit. I mean, this is a true fact. A comedian said it. I think it was Chris Rock a long time ago. Well, I might be a minority, but at least I'm not black. Okay? But yet you can sit in a room with people and have a respectful conversation and you just listen. And as you just listen, they begin to get rid of all of those ideas. They begin to instead go, oh, you're a human being. And wow, we have something in common. That's natural. And we don't need to be coached into that. And what they're coaching us is the opposite. They are coaching us into collectives and they are coaching us into um, really resenting each other, fearing each other, and I think eventually despising each other. I'm not sure that I can say that there are people in that far left category who are imposing all of these ideas that I don't have hate now for. I think I actually have hate in my heart now for
So,
that group.
Carrie,
Mm.
my suggestion on that is that I think that some of that is deliberate and some of it is organic. I think a lot of the, I suspect that a lot of the reductionism that we're doing with each other is is motivated by globalization and by the flattening of our communication styles. We have this sense that we're connected with way more people than we used to think that we were connected with. But the connection is like an inch deep, a mile wide. It's like really, really shallow. And so how much of a person can you know? This experience that you just had at this conference where you're sitting in a room with people and it's so beautiful. Like there's this really rich humanity and sharing that you get when you're in person with people. And I think that were we talking about this recently? I feel like I was just talking with somebody, maybe it was y'all, about this, about how much the way that we communicate over the internet has both helped and hurt us. And I think that on balance it's hurt us more than it's helped us, because we can have these conversations and I love that. Like I've never sat in a room with either of you. We've never I don't know how tall you are. I don't know I don't know what you look like from, this
From the
down
way
from here, right?
back
I don't
down.
have a clue. And that's so weird. But I do feel like you're my friends and I've known you
Yes.
for
Yeah.
almost 2 years. So it's like I've known y'all for 2 years. We've had many conversations. We couldn't have had that if we didn't have this medium to communicate. But also I think at the same time it changes the way that we perceive the other. And when you say that you feel like you have hate, I feel like that's the virus. That's the thing that's being transmitted, is that hate and that flattening of the other. And it's a social mind virus that is so it's so hard to resist.
Well, it feels like, I mean, they might as well be plantation owners, the way that they're coming and saying, you will do this. You will jump when we say you will do, and taking over our schools and saying your schools will be this. And some of these people online will say things like, there shouldn't be charter schools, there shouldn't be private schools, there shouldn't be home schools because we all need to learn the same, their views. And I'm like, and you don't see yourself as a dictator. You feel that your views are the only ones that matter, but you don't see yourself as a dictator. And I absolutely want that revolt. I started off, and I still feel this way, that what I'm trying to do is be the antidote. But sometimes, especially now when we're this close to an election and I'm watching the lies go through, and quite frankly, I'm watching those people be so hurt. People that I didn't know anything about their experience. And I'm watching them just go, my children hate me. And it's very hard not to hate the people who thought this was a good
Yeah.
idea. I'm sorry, you guys. That's
Yes. No, that touches on something that's very important. I think it touches on something that's very important to you, and you have an identity besides, being a woman of color. You're also a mom, you're a wife, you're an educator. I mean, all of those things, and you can't really kind of divorce those things from each other. They all kind of are part of the makeup of who you are. And I think that destructiveness is extremely painful. And I think we're caught up so much in being angry or hating that we're not seeing the amount of actual emotional hurt that's being caused. And it is painful. Maybe that's the therapist hat that I have on, is thinking about the painful part of this. But um, it's, I certainly feel levels of frustration and anger in my own heart that I've never had before about the other side, quote unquote, whatever the other side was. And that's something that has been ground kind of into me. And I think because of the fact that, you know, being in a profession or being in an environment, because even this is with my own friends that have such different sets of beliefs and values that are so far left from where I am, I feel lonely and isolated a lot of the time, to where I feel like I can't really talk to anybody about what I really think and feel. I mean, I have a therapist, I'll admit that, and I talk to her to an extent, but that's a very different experience than having a close friend or a close, you know, well, friend that I can actually say, this disgusts me. And I'm not worried about that friend going, oh my gosh, how could you think that? How could you think it's not okay to have an abortion up until the ninth month? Isn't that acceptable? Why not? It's a woman's body after all. We saw an ad yesterday when we were out, the TV was on, whatever. And they showed these fetuses, okay, that had been aborted. Okay. It was probably one of the most horrific things I had seen. And that does nothing for me to change my mind about whether I'm pro life or I'm pro choice. All it did was totally like disgust me, gross me out, and actually generate feelings of hate and disgust for the extreme other party. Why would you do this? This is harmful. This is traumatic. And truth be told, we were all out at a restaurant slash bar where the TVs are on everywhere and everybody's watching all of this at the same time, and there are children there. Okay, so that to me was very damaging. Why do you have to dehumanize? And it's dehumanizing to those fetuses. If we believe they're humans from when the point of conception happens or not, it doesn't matter. These particular photos, they were full grown fetuses, and that was demoralizing and demeaning to them, let alone the woman who might have birthed them, the man who might have been the father, etc. And those things have just, that's where a lot of the bubbling up of the hate, of the extremeness of the left and the extremeness of the right makes
yeah,
me really stuck and
yeah,
very upset. And like I said, lonely, isolated, and in a world all on my own. If it wasn't for the two of you and some other people I have found during this journey, I don't know where I would have been, quite frankly, because this is my way of connecting with people other than my husband. Thank God we think alike in so many ways. Thank God for him. But outside of that, that's just not the case. And so the hate I feel is, again, it's the extremity of the right, okay, and the left. That was a very right wing putting up pictures like that, and that was unnecessary. And although I see myself as more of a liberal and centrist, I think I lean right on some things, and I think I lean more left on others. I think that's typical, but
Well, I
that
wondered,
was
like,
not acceptable.
one of the problems I think with with all of the media that we have is that we get introduced to things that are outside of our own sphere. Like if that issue was not presenting itself to you in your life, but you were then introduced to that and asked to feel a certain way. You were provoked with an issue that
Yes.
was outside of your sphere. And that's kind of like if we're in a democratic society where people are always weighing in on what other people should be doing, then our one of our citizen responsibilities becomes being a judge of values for other people. And I
Yes.
feel like that judgment is it's sort of antithetical to contentment and peace. I
Yeah.
don't know how to articulate this very well, but we have such an epidemic. There's a reason why the word Karen made so many people like go, "Oh my god, yes, like I know who Karen is," and they can point to Karen everywhere. Because it became this meme that we were all like, oh yeah, I know that lady and I know her in 30 different forms. It's the busybody woman who comes out of nowhere to lecture you or to have a problem or to, raise whatever. And that sense of control and micromanagement by other people
Yes.
is something that like I feel when you're talking about not having that one friend, you have places where you have that in your life through your therapist and through some of your connections, but
Mhm.
missing that sense of just being able to just really have one place, one like your maybe it's your mother, and I don't have my mother anymore, but I would have
I
loved
don't
to, and
either.
you don't either,
Yeah.
yeah, and you
Yeah.
don't either.
For
We're a
20
bunch of
years.
motherless women
Yes.
at this
For
point.
20 years.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
so sad. And but my mom was kind of that for me. I could call her and
Yeah.
have that kind of
My mother
conversation with
too.
her. But now
I
I
want to,
feel
can I
scattered
respond?
in every way. Yeah, go ahead, Christine.
Scattered.
Yeah, please.
I just wanted to respond one thing somebody said. I just opened the chat and I usually
Mm-hmm.
don't do that, but somebody said they were unclear, 97 cents, unclear whether Christina's saying it's dehumanizing to abort those fetuses or use them as a prop. I mean, use them as a prop. That's a very, thank you for asking that question. But using them as a prop for whatever the circumstances were that those fetuses were aborted at that size and age, I don't agree with that either. But they were used as a prop in this particular example I was talking about. So I'll just clear that up for you.
Yeah,
Um,
I was
but
going to
go ahead.
respond in the chat real quick. Some people are saying maybe I could set up a StreamYard to open up for
Mm-hmm.
frequent chatters. I don't know how to do that. I'm not opposed to that at some point. We do have an online community called Solid Ground. It is at solidgroundsupport.org. Everybody can join. Right now, we only charge $5 a month for membership, and we have weekly meetings. We have right now 3 to 4. We're about to add in another one starting next week. And so those are really great. There's really great discussions. We don't record them or stream them, they're private, but they resemble these kinds of conversations very much. So you're all invited, solidgroundsupport.org. Please join us if you're interested in that kind of thing.
Can I say the other thing about the abortion side? I I had a friend once who called me up 3 years after she'd had an abortion, and she was as liberal, progressive as she possibly could be, right? And she called me up and she said, my daughter would have been 3. So I live in a state and my friends are massive pro-lifers, massive, massive, massive. But I think that watching a video like that is completely not thinking about the woman who has regrets. Yes, the women are being paraded who are proud of the fact that they've aborted or that feel empowered that they can do it. But there are a lot of women who are
Oh, yeah.
broke that they lost a child. And
Absolutely.
that's why like people will ask me and they guess, and some people decide whether or not they like what I do based on what I say or don't say, and I don't comment on this because I mean, the reality is I absolutely believe it's a life. That's what I'll say. But I also think that the mother who's surviving needs compassion as well. Even the mother who is told now. I watched your guys' Monday show just before this, and watching women who were told, it's not important to have kids. There's much more important things in the world, and regretting it later. There's so many women
Oh, that
that
that was a very
there's
intense conversation
what,
for me
and there's
too.
so many women out there who have been told the lie, especially Black women. I know I look really pale in this, but but I am part Black, and especially those women who've been taught when they were young that it's no big deal. They gave up a part of themselves. Have a little respect. Have a little respect in the conversation.
Yeah.
Sorry, but I feel really strongly about that.
I think no, you're right. There is a grief that comes with having to make a decision like that. It's not again, we lose the nuance. It's not as simple as saying, I believe I'm, I'm pro-life or I'm pro-choice. There's pro-choice does not mean pro-abortion. It means pro-choice. And I think that's another thing is it's equated a lot of the time to pro-abortion. I know several women who are pro-choice, technically, it's a woman's body, but they themselves personally would never have an abortion. That to them doesn't work for them. So they personally don't believe in that. And then I've got a couple of friends who have had abortions that turned around and said it's the best thing I ever did for myself. I could have never had a kid under those circumstances. And then there's the people that have the regrets who I know that have said, well, perhaps my child would have been this age, at this particular time. And in none of those conversations does I'm pro-choice or I'm pro-abortion ever come up. They don't discuss their feeling, their moral, standpoint on that as much as what their experience is of having had one, not had one. Uh, you know, my own. I mean, I have a family member who will say, I can't stand listening to anyone talk about having had one because it makes me think about not having one of my own kids. She cannot divorce herself from that being a part of like you know from that having affected her personally, like thinking about abortion is thinking about having aborted her own child, and that's she can't separate herself from that. So that's a particularly different kind of viewpoint
Uh,
as well
and I think
in
this
the midst
issue
of all of these.
is another one where we have the issue
Hmm.
itself is one of reductionism, because by the time you get to abortion there have to be so many levels of breakdown socially. I mean, we're talking about a failure of education, for one thing. That's a simple one, like how do we, you know, teach our daughters about values around sex and sexuality. We also have a failure of responsibility on the part of girls and boys, men and women, when it comes to sex
Yes.
and family. But we also have, well, we have a failure of an entire culture to support families and support
Yes, we do.
and embrace families. And I think that things like birth control, that's a really weak, that's another one of those weak stopgaps. What that does, what does birth control do? It just enables the same debaucherous behavior that's not taking responsibility for sexual connection with other people. And it does so at the cost of women's health. I mean, birth control is
Hmm.
not, it's not an innocuous thing. It's not like drinking a glass of water. You're actually changing
Hmm.
your hormonal structure in ways that you can't undo. And we don't really understand all of the ways that that's changing us.
Hmm.
And so by the time you get to the point of arguing about one person's choice to have an abortion, there's this whole sea of failure and spiritual breakdown that has to occur. And it's not just women, it's men too. It's women and men. It's not just teach the girls to close their legs. Well, what about teach the guys that they have to respect sex? That sex is not just some right that you have, that you're just entitled to. And, this is each part of that, each component of that sea of failures could be an entire conversation, I think.
And what about the man who didn't want the woman to abort because he really wanted to keep the baby as well?
So many different
That had
things. So many
so many
things.
different things.
Mm-hmm.
My issue is that when they teach in schools that it's a great option, that it's just a natural part of healthcare, that's where it becomes, that's not fair. That's not fair. It's not a full education for kids. And it's not something that kids who aren't having sex or aren't at the age of having sex need to start talking about. So,
Let's see,
but it's,
in the last 6 years of women being like men is empowering. Hmm.
I think that's part of a longer thought, but
Yeah, yeah. But that's also why I don't consider myself a feminist anymore either. The feminists, I think, of the past and the present have made it such that it's a problem to be a woman and to desire. If I want to stay home, look, I said this on solid ground on Monday, like there are regrets I have not ever having children. There are regrets that I feel and some grief I feel over the fact that I'm never going to have experience being a mother. And there are times where I wanted to be an at home mother. There are moments where I just thought, screw this career. I'd rather be at home taking care of my children right now and taking them to play dates and doing all the things that you do. Understanding very clearly that it's not easy to raise kids. I was around my nephews a lot, so I saw struggles my sister had raising three boys. And so I didn't idealize having a family.
mm-hmm.
At the same time, there are a lot of points in time where I wish that I had been able to do that. And for me, the feminist point of view was very much about career this, career that, and that you can have it all and there are no trade offs. And we talked about this too on Solid Ground on Monday, the idea of wants and trade offs, things of that nature. And, it's not an easy. It's not an easy path, and I made some choices that led me to be where I am. I'm married to somebody who has a child already and doesn't want more, and we met when we were older in life, and I was at a point in age wise where I didn't think it was something that I could really do, and um, that was it. We had to choose a different path for what our marriage and what our life together looks like.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's a lot of nuances behind what led up to that person even considering having an abortion. What are they not getting? What kind of education, what kind of support are they not getting?
I
It's really
was
fascinating.
18 when I got pregnant with my first child, and
Yeah.
I was terrified. I didn't want to have an abortion. I didn't want to become a mother at 18. I didn't feel like my boyfriend at the time was, I didn't feel in love with him, and it scared
Hmm.
me. We decided to get married so that, we'd be a family and have insurance and everything, like, all the things would be taken care of. But it was really scary, and I became a mom at 19, and I was treated like a teenage pregnancy by the medical system, and it was really embarrassing, and I felt very low. I felt like I was treated like I was kind of scummy and low class for being such a young mom. And it was, I thought I was going to have a career and go to college and do something with my life, right? Quote unquote. And so it was, in terms of my sense of myself, in terms of status, I felt very knocked down by that experience. And I
Hmm.
felt like when I
Hmm.
tried to join moms groups, I had another child when I was 21 on purpose because I didn't want my child to be an only child. I
Hmm.
thought I took it very seriously. I have become a mother now, and I have my responsibility is to structure my family and be very intentional about this. It wasn't like, oh, you didn't know what was causing that. It was, no, it was really intentional. I thought I want to plan my children 2 years apart. I think that's a good spacing. And so, even though I was young, I thought, well, the silver lining on this is that I get it out of the way early, and I will be very young when my children are grown, and I can be a young mom for them. So I tried to do everything, as far as I thought, right and properly. But it was really quite, it was difficult to not be taken seriously, to be treated like I was a young, stupid mom by other people, not to be taken
Hmm.
seriously in play groups because I was young, just to be kind of looked down on for being that age.
Judged.
Yeah, judged. And then my husband that I married didn't grow up and get his act together when I did. He kept on being an irresponsible guy who smoked pot and stayed out late and didn't really have that much interest in taking care of kids and having a family. So I was trying to craft this Donna Reed life with someone who was just not interested. And when that fell apart and I was single at 25, 26, it was just, it's been a series of things. And it's just one person's life. This is just my life. But I,
Yeah.
I find that we don't live in a time when it's really, when things lay themselves out for you and the culture supports family.
Right.
It's hard. It was really hard. I had to be a single mom. I tried really hard to parent with somebody who didn't want to parent, and then was left as a single mother after that. And it's just been a series of watching, just in one human life who's trying to do it right, the culture not being there to back that up. So women who are making choices that they feel like they need to make, I feel like the decision to outlaw abortion in this way misses, and I'm not saying I think it's right or wrong, because I think my feelings about abortion have moved in my lifetime from being really
Hmm.
pro-choice to being a little bit more conservative, but I still wouldn't see the state crack down and outlaw it, because I think that it it just really does represent the tail end of a series of things that are so much more important on a spiritual and cultural level to address than
Yeah.
that one
Hmm.
thing. So,
Clarify a few things on the political side because I'm in
yeah.
Utah, and
Hmm.
we really thought that if anybody was going to completely end abortion, it would have been us. And our judges ended up being progressives, and so it was only stopped for 3 days, and now they're pushing for everything to be open. But I want to. So I saw Spinster Mountain talking, and I think that the thing that the way that you heal is you have to believe in redemption. So I know. So Spencer Mountain said that she felt that she'd murdered someone, and the thing is that you have to believe in redemption. And also, I found this throughout life is that you have to put responsibility where it goes. And if you have to take a little bit of it, that's fine. But there's other people. What other influences told you it was a good idea, right? Like what were you trained? How were you taught? Because that's where that's where you cannot have so much guilt because I did almost everything right in that I was like locked at the knees girl. Okay. I wasn't going to, I wasn't, I had infertility issues. So, um, but I wanted 4 kids and I've grieved that. I've grieved the fact that I've only been able to
Hmm.
have, um, and I just think to me, the most complicated thing about abortion is that Margaret Sanger started it as a way to purify the race.
Hmm.
That's how it's.
Yes.
And so, knowing that and knowing that so many people embrace it and think it's empowering when the whole original start of it was let's get rid of these people
Hmm.
is where I find it like, let's educate people on where it came from. And also, let's have a counselor talk to them about what they might feel afterwards. Um, let's have people come in and speak to them based on what they've experienced, good or bad. Let people have those conversations instead of just, ooh, here's my fifth abortion. Isn't it awesome?
Hmm.
I mean, that's what people are doing on social media, and it's disgusting. But Spinster Mountain, I just hope that you feel seen and that you um, I don't want you to have to live with that every day. I mean, I know that you probably do, but I just think that we can have a much more compassionate conversation about it. And I think that that would win over the liberal argument because I don't believe most people think that you should be able to abort up until the 9th month. I don't believe most people
No.
think that that should be a thing.
Hmm.
I do think that I think that when one side is seen as being hateful and at any cost, and that's just misinformation because there's no state that I'm aware of that doesn't have life of the mother precautions. These
Mm-hmm.
people, when Kamala brings a person up and parades them around, they're talking about a malfunction with the medication that they took. That's what happened. They took the pill, and that made, or not, they took the abortion drug, and they had
Mm.
something went wrong with that. So the way that it's presented, like so many other things, isn't true. But I think that really, I think the whole of everything that we've talked about really comes down to just being willing to listen to different perspectives. And my hatred for those people isn't really necessarily about those people. It's about knowing that as hard as we fight to be the voice of reason, they're still getting to us too. Yuri Bezmenov's demoralization warning is still coming to all of us as well. No matter how hard we fight it, can't
Mm.
avoid.
I wanted to read this. I love this thing that Spinster Mountain said. It was part of a longer sentence or longer comment, but she says, sex is not just a sport with unfortunate consequences like pregnancy and STDs. And I think that's such an important and clear point to make. Yeah, it is treated like a sport, really. Like you've seen these Planned Parenthood commercials that are like about virginity and it's about sex, could be blah 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 blah, and it just all comes down to consent. Like just make sure everybody's okay and then do whatever you want. And it just misses the point that this is a sacred function by which we create life and that there's a lot more to it than just that.
Yes.
And
That sounds to me like a very spiritual and even maybe somewhat religious way to look at it, based on some kind of spiritual. And I wonder if that's the reason that people don't take that in, if that makes
well,
sense.
take out the word sacred and then say that it is the way we create life. There's nothing,
Hmm.
I mean,
Yes.
unless you think about the spirit as being integral to what we are, which you could
Right.
argue about that. I mean, whatever. Is there a soul? Is there a spirit? Are we just
Sure.
mechanical things
Sure.
that, are we just Legos that get put together? But I think you know, we do create life through this act. And
Yes.
we keep trying to place technology in between us and that, but it's still the fact. It's still how the next generation comes into the world. And when we look at all the technologies
So
that we
true.
place in between the truth and the act, the life and the act, it's none of those are without complication.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and always, I mean, you don't stop having sex when you can't have kids necessarily.
Mm-mm. No.
So it's not necessarily that, but there should be a connection because I do think every time you have sex with someone, you give a part of yourself away.
Well, I think a
So
lot of people wouldn't agree with that. I do, but I don't think that would resonate with everybody.
Hmm. I agree.
but I, when I was in my 20s, I was very lonely for one summer. And I did some stupid things that I wish I didn't do for just one summer. But I definitely I don't like the idea that if I was in Seattle, I could walk by certain places and go, oops, 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 in one. So so I do think that it's not just recreation because you have those moments where even if it's a small thing, I don't. There are a few people who I don't know their names, and I feel stupid about that.
Yeah.
But that's the reality, and that is especially the reality when you grow up watching Sex in the City. When
Yeah.
they that's so extremely normal when you're 20. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think that there's a lot. I do think that it's always giving yourself, and if people don't agree, that's fine. But I think that you're always giving a part of yourself. You're being extremely vulnerable with someone. Um,
Well, even if you look at the facts, right, is you sex produces a bonding hormone in a woman. There's a biological reason that happens, right? So she can bond with the partner, with the male partner. What is it? Oxytocin, I think
Hmm.
is what it's called.
Hmm. And
So
prolactin.
even if
Yeah.
you take all of this out of it, and you just look at it from a scientific point of view, there is a need to bond, a desire to bond in the act of sex, at least on the woman's side, with what we know about what is produced in the brain. That's the bonding feature. So, even taking all of this out of it, and let's go back to science and just the facts. Well, there are the facts. There is something in nature that wants us to pair up and bond with the people that we give ourselves to or choose to give ourselves to. Um, there's something that's very clearly there. And I think that's a very profound way of looking at it, kind of how you were talking about it, Cari, just giving a piece of yourself. But I think you can even argue that point from a scientific point of view, too.
Yeah.
Well, ladies, I think maybe we should wrap up. We've been streaming for a
Yes.
while. It's been a really good conversation. Do you have any
Yeah.
final thoughts or things you want to conclude with?
I just want to say that I think the chats are incredible. I've never actually looked at the chat while we've been streaming before, and I did today. So I just want to kind of give props out to all of the listeners and the really profound and insightful comments that people make on here. I think that's I'm really humbled to be a part of something that can generate so much conversation and discussion. So I wanted to end with that.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to say one thing about next week as the election comes in. Find your tribe and get really close to them next week, because I think that regardless of whatever outcomes, we are going to be in a very hostile space. I think a lot of people will be hurting and lashing out. And so just find your people and be around them.
I will be starting the first solid ground group on Tuesdays on election day. That's going to be my first day. So if anybody wants to jump into the group, if you're available, it's going to be Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific, which is 8 p.m. Eastern. You're welcome to join. And I knew it was election day, and I was very conscious of it being the first time that I'll start a solid ground group, but I will. So, you're welcome to come in for some camaraderie as well. Hopefully, we'll have that kind of dynamic in the group. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're
I'm
so
going to.
happy to have you with us, Christine. We're really excited to have you on board as one of the
Thank you.
facilitators and really excited for your first group. I have a group that meets on Wednesday afternoons. So, yeah, please join us. I misspoke the website earlier, solidgroundsupport.com. It's not org. I said org. The comms and the orgs. But yeah,
Yes.
Christine, I want to echo your thanks to the chat. I always enjoy the chats very much, and one of the reasons why I like this platform is that it makes it easier to interface with the chat than YouTube does,
Mhm.
and so I can actually put comments up on the screen and things like that. So it's really great, and we always appreciate you guys. Thank you all so much, and good luck, happy voting, and we'll see you. Oh, and thank you so much for the super chat. Nechama Gluck, Nehama Gluck. Thank you so much. That's so nice. And everybody, have a wonderful week. Thank you, ladies, for joining me today.
Yes, that was fun. Thanks.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye, all.
Bye
Bye.
bye.